Are you a fake Christian? Well, stick around, because in today's video, we're going to talk about what that looks like and what to do if you are one. Hey y'all, I'm Pastor B from Forward Church. Welcome to today's video. In this video, we're going to help you move forward with God by looking at 3 warnings that Jesus gives about fake spirituality or fake Christianity. Now make sure you stick around to the end of the video, because at the end I'm going to share one big takeaway that we can all apply into our lives to make sure we avoid the trap of fake Christianity. Now before we dive in, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can be notified anytime we release new videos designed to help you move forward with God. So let's jump in. In Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 40, we see this. And in his teaching, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and like greetings in the marketplaces and have the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." Jesus has been teaching in Mark chapter 12 at the temple. He's on the Temple Mount in what's referred to as the temple complex. Now, while he's there, this is the last week of his life. He will shortly go to the cross where he will die for the forgiveness of the sins of humanity. And while he's there, he's constantly challenged by Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes. These are the religious leaders of the day that actually make up what's referred to as the Sanhedrin, or like the Jewish Supreme Court of the day. Now, Jesus tells his followers to beware of the scribes that have fake spirituality. Now, in this, he calls these scribes out for doing a handful of things. He calls them out for wearing long robes and wanting to have all the best seats in synagogues and going through the marketplaces, desiring people to greet them and people to basically bow down and show them honor. See, in that day and age, scribes would actually go through the marketplaces with long, special ceremonial robes on. Many scholars actually think that this was what was referred to as a Jewish talit, which is a prayer shawl. And there's nothing wrong with a prayer shawl. I actually have one I bought whenever I went to Israel a year ago. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But what these scribes were doing is they were going above and beyond. They were sewing extra long tassels on the end of their prayer shawls, and they were making sure that their religion and that their spirituality was being put on display. And so as they did that, they were being very pretentious and very man-centered. So Jesus gathers his disciples together, and Mark says that it was in his teaching that he taught them to beware of the scribes who went around this way. Jesus gives 3 things to be on the lookout for that we're going to talk about today in this video. The first one is this: beware of loving your position more than you love Jesus. Beware of loving your position more than you love Jesus. Jesus says, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and like greetings in the marketplaces and have the best seats in synagogues and the places of honor at feasts. There's nothing wrong with having a position. There's nothing wrong with being a leader in the church. There's nothing wrong with being someone who tries to influence people for God. But what Jesus was showing here and pointing out were that these scribes weren't doing this just because they felt love for God or just because they wanted to help people. Rather, they were doing that because they were enjoying their own position and their own accolades. We see this happen all the time in our modern day and age, where sometimes pastors or preachers or people who are Christian leaders can often exalt themselves above the God that it is that they're claiming to worship. I've seen this in my own life several times where I have to fight against this grain of wanting to be noticed and wanting to be recognized. I think about a time whenever I was in Bible college, I actually served on staff at a local church as a praise and worship leader. And on that staff, there were 2 guys named Brian, myself and one other guy, and we were both pastors on this staff. And we decided that the way to be able to tell the difference between that Brian and this Brian was everybody would just call me Pastor B. No, I absolutely love it. That's what I've been called for years and years. It's a name that I love being called. But what I did was I actually went after that meeting where we decided I was going to be Pastor B and he was going to be Pastor Brian. I went to the Christian bookstore and I got a leather-bound Bible and I had them put Pastor B on the cover of that Bible. Not Brian, not Reverend. I had them put Pastor B on the cover of that Bible. See, it's one thing for you to have your name in the Lamb's Book of Life. It's another for your name to be on the Lamb's Book of Life. Come on, somebody. Now, you may not think there's anything wrong with that, but I've got to be honest with you. On the inside, in my heart, the only reason that I had them do that was because I drew significance and identity from people calling me Pastor B. It wasn't good enough that I was just Brian who served Jesus and who served the church. I needed to poke my chest out and be Pastor B. Well, that's what these scribes were doing. They were going around and they were having these extra long ceremonial robes, and they were wearing these robes in the marketplaces. They weren't just wearing them in church. There's nothing wrong if you wear a robe in church, nothing wrong with that at all, but they were actually wearing them in the marketplaces and walking around expecting and anticipating people to essentially worship them and bow down at their feet. I've heard of many modern megachurch pastors, and this isn't a dig at megachurch pastors. I love megachurches, well, some of them. But I've heard of certain pastors that actually have handlers, and they can't get close to the people because their celebrity status is so big that they come in and they preach and they get the crowd going, and then they leave without really interacting with anybody other than the staff. And now, I understand that certain contexts call for certain protocol. I totally get that. But we've got to remember that Jesus was telling these guys that there are certain scribes or religious leaders who only care about their position. They don't care about serving others. They don't care about serving God. They care about their own position. I think about what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount. He said, when you pray, don't babble on and on and on and make these big, long prayers, because if you do that, if you're praying just to be seen by people, then your reward is not God answering prayers, but rather your reward is you're seen by people. And it's one thing for people to think you're super spiritual and, wow, that Brian sure is close to Jesus. But it's a totally different thing to actually be close to Jesus. So the first warning we see here is beware of loving your position more than you love Jesus. Now, the second warning that we see here from this text that we've read today is to beware of taking advantage of people financially. Beware of taking advantage of people financially. Jesus says that these scribes devour widows' houses. And it's very powerful language that Jesus is using here. He doesn't mean that they literally eat their houses. But what Jesus is getting across here is that these scribes are so wicked that they actually are going out and destroying and taking all of the money and finances that these poor widows have. It's one thing for you to take advantage of somebody who may be strong or somebody who may be able to take care of themselves, but widows are a special class of people to be taken care of. As a matter of fact, all throughout the Old Testament and in the New Testament, we see that God places special attention to orphans and widows. He's very intentional about people taking care of those that can't take care of themselves. Yet these scribes, who, by the way, are the scholars of the day, they're the ones who know over and over and over again that God has spoken in the Old Testament, which was really their Bible of the day, the Hebrew Bible. These scribes know what God's perspective is on taking care of widows. Yet, instead of taking care of widows, Jesus says they devour widows' houses. Now, we don't know exactly what they're doing, but what many scholars believe is that these scribes were actually manipulating the widows to get them to give their inheritance to the scribes in the temple. See, the scribes were an interesting group. They didn't make a regular income from other jobs. Their money came from people financially supporting them in the temple. And so what many scholars believe is these scribes that were money hungry would take advantage of these widows financially by causing them to give more than they could or more than they were able to give. And by taking advantage of them, Jesus says they're devouring widows' houses. That's something that we see not just in the Old Testament with these scribes or in the first century, but we also see that in today's church as well. Like, all you've got to do is really turn on any Christian TV to see pastor after pastor, or I should probably do this with quotation marks, pastor after pastor, saying things like, if you sow a financial seed, then God's going to bless you, or if you help me raise millions of dollars for a jet because I'm too good to fly coach, or if you just give me money, I'll send you a special anointed prayer thing, or whatever it is. And I hate to question people's motives, but honestly, from the outside looking in, it really looks like it's people that are devouring widows' houses and taking advantage of people financially. See, I wrestle with this stress as well as a pastor. My livelihood comes from people giving, and when people give to our church, then part of that money that they give goes to support me and support my family. And there's that fine line of making sure that we're giving and that we're taking care of the church and taking care of outreach and all of that. But there, on the other side of that fine line, my flesh can come in and try to make me manipulate people when we do tithe and offering time, and try to sell people and convince people to give more. But at the end of the day, Jesus is giving a very stern warning about people that financially manipulate others. Paul the Apostle actually said that we were going to run into this same situation in the New Testament church. There's a letter that he wrote to his mentee, or his son in the faith, a guy by the name of Timothy, who happened to be a local church pastor. And in this letter to Timothy, he warned about false teachers who were more concerned with money than they were with the mission. We read in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 9 and 10 this: "But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare or a trap, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." Paul was essentially saying to Timothy that there will be people that come into the church in the New Testament times. And these people, by the way, we're still in the New Testament times. There will be people that come into the church and their main concern is money. And as a result, they're going to be falling into a trap. They're going to fall into temptation. They're going to have a hard time. They're going to pierce themselves through. And so we talked about beware of loving your position. Now we're talking about beware of financially manipulating people. I want to encourage you. God will provide for you. Take care of yourself. Make sure that you're giving and that you're supporting the ministries that God has called you to support. But make sure that you're not financially manipulating people. Now, the third warning that we see from Jesus is this: beware of performance-driven spirituality. Oh my. Beware of performance-driven spirituality. I can't tell you how many times that in my life, when maybe I've been called on to pray in public, or I've been asked to say something, and there's that temptation for me to try to make my prayers long and special, and I start using language that I don't use in my regular vernacular or my regular conversations. I do that as a preacher, to be honest with you. My wife picks on me all the time. She says I have a preacher's voice. I'm using it right now, to be honest with you. And it's that temptation to be performance driven. And when we do that, when we start praying in ways that we don't normally pray, and talking and acting in ways that we don't normally act, what we're doing is we're doing this for others, and we're not doing it for God. Jesus said to beware of those who want the long robes and the best seats, and they want to walk around in the marketplaces and receive good greetings. They're devouring widows' houses. And then he said, who for pretense make long, lengthy prayers. They're praying just to show off to people. See, the truth is, God's called us to show up, not show off. And there's this fleshly temptation that each of us has to try to show off, because if we're honest, deep down inside, we really want people to like us. Now, maybe you're like me and you're a people pleaser and you want all the people to like you. I get that. I identify with that like crazy. Maybe you're not like a super people pleaser. Maybe you don't want all the people to please you. Maybe you just want certain people to like you and to appreciate you. Wherever you fall on that scale, we can fall into a danger when we're doing our Christianity or our relationship with God for others and not for God. That's what these scribes were doing. They were putting on a religious show. They didn't concern themselves with a relationship with God. Now, to a certain degree, yeah, they did. But Jesus is pointing out something significant here, that there were some of them that they didn't care about the relationship with God. They simply made their long prayers for a pretense to show off to others. I'll tell you, this has happened to me so many times. One time in particular I think about is I got an opportunity to be a part of a pastor's conference. And in this conference, there were these really awesome keynote speakers that were going to be talking. And what my job was I got to be the MC that kind of controlled everything. And as being that MC, I also got a slot where I could speak myself. And the cool part about it is this was back in my hometown, or right next to my hometown. So there were a lot of people that knew me growing up that came to this event. And so I had all these people in this room. And, I'm this cool guy who goes off to Bible college and is becoming a pastor, and he knows all this stuff about the Bible and history and all of that. So I really wanted to impress people. And I came back and man, I was telling this message on Joseph. And I wanted to talk about Joseph from the Old Testament and all the things that God did from him. But the problem was I got so in my head thinking about how to make other people like me that instead of saying Joseph, I actually said Jacob. Now, I was preaching the Joseph story, but I was saying Jacob every time the name Joseph was supposed to be said. And people were looking at me like I was crazy. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not doing good enough. I'm not doing good enough. So I just started preaching harder. And preaching harder means louder and faster. And I'm like, oh man, y'all ain't ready for this. And I got some deep revelation for you. And here's some wisdom word of God for you. The problem was I was mistaking the names. Now, as soon as that was over, a friend of mine came up and he was like, dude, you screwed up. You messed up big time. And I'm like, oh no. And it immediately came to me what I did. No, I share that with you simply for this reason. I didn't care about serving God at that moment. At that moment, I just wanted people to like me. At that moment, I just wanted people to look at me and go, oh, wow, Brian's so smart and he knows so much and he's so close to Jesus. When in reality, I just made a fool of myself. Now, that's what we do whenever we're performance driven. And the thing about being performance driven, which is so dangerous, is when we perform well, we think that we are well. And when we perform poorly, we think that we are poor. And that is not a good, healthy place to draw our identity from. That's not a good, healthy place to build a relationship with God. And Jesus knew that, and he knew that's what was happening with these scribes. And so it says that he calls his disciples, and it's in his teaching, he says to them, beware of these things. And so today, as we beware of those things, the question that naturally arises is, okay, so what now? Here's what now. Be discerning. That's it. Discernment is, one, it's a spiritual gift, but it's also something that we can cultivate in our own lives. The Bible says that we're to test the spirits, that we're to see whether these things that are happening are things that are happening of God or not. And so my encouragement to you is to be discerning. Be discerning. Is that pastor or preacher or spiritual leader, is that person one of these scribes like Jesus was referring to here? Or is that person someone who's genuinely trying to seek after God and seek after your well-being? Also, don't just be discerning for others. Be discerning for yourself as well. Are you more in love with your position than you are with Jesus? Are you financially manipulating situations and people? Are you performance driven, or are you drawing close to Jesus in relationship? Be discerning. And when you figure out where you are on the scale of those things, ask God to help you by his grace to live a life that honors him. Ask God to help you not be more concerned with your position than you are with Jesus. Ask God to help you not be so consumed with finances that you lean into manipulating people financially. And pray that God would help you not be shackled to performance-driven Christianity, but that God would loose you in the gospel of Jesus. Okay, guys, it's bonus tip time. Now, before we go into the bonus tip, go ahead and hit that like button. Let me know that you're enjoying this content today, all right? Here we go. Here's the bonus tip. Avoid me-centered Christianity. That's it. We have a tendency to do things that are me-centered. At the end of the day, we're fleshly and sinful. And although Jesus has saved us, we still have this natural tendency to go into selfish Christianity. And when we go into me-centered Christianity, it's when we sing songs that are all about us and what we get from God, and I need a blessing, I need a breakthrough, I need this. This is the me-centered Christianity where we go to certain churches because of what they can give me and how they can benefit me and grow my spiritual life. And our interaction with God and our interaction with others isn't about how we can love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength and love our neighbor as ourselves. Instead, it's about what can I get out of this for me. And so if you want to avoid being like these scribes, avoid me-centered Christianity. As a matter of fact, not just avoiding me-centered Christianity is what you need to do, but make sure that you replace the me from me-centered Christianity with God and Christ. See, when we focus on Christ, all the other things will work themselves out. As a matter of fact, Jesus said in Matthew 6 that if we seek his kingdom above all else, all these other things will be added to them. Now, if you're interested in finding out more ways that you can avoid me-centered Christianity and move forward with God, make sure that you've subscribed to this video and that you've hit that bell icon so you can be notified every time we release new videos designed to help you move forward with God. So, that's it. 3 things that Jesus warns us about whenever we're looking at fake Christianity and one thing to do. What did you learn from today, or what would you add from this video? Put it in the comments below and let's have a conversation about it. Thanks, guys. I'm Pastor B. I love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.